following is an interview with Dr. Avery King, Avery King, MD, conducted at his house at 138 Cumberland View Drive, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Interview conducted by Dr. Charles Johnson, Center for the Study of War and Society. Today's date is August 3rd, 1995. Yeah, I like to start with just asking kind of what your life was like before you went into the military.
Oh. Well, I was born and brought up in Vermont, 20 miles from the Canadian border, and my father was a country practitioner, and I grew up with him practicing medicine in our kitchen, and he used to sew with a lot of farmers, and they had a lot of lacerations, and he used to sew them up there in the kitchen, and my mother, he was very good at crocheting and other things. So this was all...
So you started early?
I started early. I went to the University of Vermont, and then I went to the University of Vermont Medical School, and graduated in 1942, and then I interned in the Army. Of course, the war was well underway then, and I got an Army internship at Brooke General, which was then Station Hospital, Fort Sam Houston.
Was this common for people getting out of medical school in...
Well, they were, of course, everything was in a turmoil then, and I had been active in the ROTC and had a reserve commission, so I went in the Army as a Army intern. I don't know, it wasn't common, no, because there were only 10 interns at Fort Sam when I was there.
I was wondering, in your graduating class, did you think most of the people ended up in service, or?
Yes, they most all did, because they were most all of them were in the reserves, and they were called up to active duty when they finished their internship. And I finished my internship in 1943, and was immediately sent to Carlisle Barracks, was where the Army Field Medical School was.
And the Army, the Military History Institute is up there right now.
Yes,
the Army
we
War
went back
College
there and visited within a year to see what it was like. It was all been built up with the history and stuff is there.
Right, it's built up. It's still pretty, though.
Oh, it is. It's Carlisle.
I enjoy working up there.
Right. Have you been there, have you?
Yeah, I've been there a number of times.
Well, I spent about a month and a half at on the medical field school. I had been there at ROTC for 6 weeks in the summer after my sophomore year, so I was familiar with it.
What were they teaching you?
Oh, how to be a soldier, how to salute, and how to find your way with a compass, and important things like that. And we were out on a march, and the Jeep pulled up and said King, Jordan, and Irwin, Jordan, and King. They picked the three right out of the middle. And we went back, and we had to report to the New York Port of Embarkation within the daylight hours of the next day.
Not much
And needless to say, it was very upsetting to my wife.
I was going to say, you were married then.
Yes, I married when I went to the internship. And so I drew all my uniforms, and I guess it really sunk in on her when I came back with all this junk and a helmet. She looked at that, and that kind of broke her out in tears. Well, anyway, we went to New York, and then I went to Camp Shanks, and super secret, and within 2 days I was on the ship in a convoy going to North Africa. And I was assigned to the 33rd Field Hospital, which was the major unit that I was with over there.
That was in Tunisia, or?
Well, we went to North Africa. At that time, they had already made the landing at Salerno.
Okay.
That was in August or September of 43, yes. Right. And we went to Oran in Algeria for staging. We were at a big convoy. The battleship Texas was right next to us. And not too much happened on it. We went through Gibraltar, and the Germans bombed us. Air Force bombed there, but I was hardly aware of it because it was way in the back, and they did hit a destroyer. But anyway, we went into Oran, and we were there about a month while we drew our equipment. And then we sailed...
How big a hospital are we talking about?
Oh,
what size?
the field hospital, we had 3 platoons, probably 5 officers to each platoon, and probably 120 enlisted men, and about 5 nurses, maybe 6.
5 nurses. How many doctors?
4 or 5.
4 or 5.
4, I guess, really, because some of the others were MAC officers, yeah.
MAC.
Medical Administrative Corps. That was MAC. That's what we called them then. MS, I guess they call them now. Well, anyway, went to North Africa, staged there, and then we went in a convoy into Naples, which had just been taken the day before we arrived.
Probably was pretty much of a mess.
Oh, the harbor of Naples was just full of half-sunken vessels, and it was the worst disaster I've ever seen. So we filed through there in the ship. We were on a cargo assault thing. I can't remember that. It had been a former banana boat, but it was a cargo assault thing. But anyway, we went to Bagnoli, which is a little north of Naples, and there was a landing thing there they'd had for seaplanes. And so we pulled in the harbor there and unloaded. And it was not without some excitement. We had the mines went in a kind of a beach area, and we had some character that wandered out of where the tapes was. These were all green, you know, and this landmine went off, and I'm telling you, he went 60 feet in the air. And that shook everybody up, I'm telling you.
Yeah, that'd make you careful.
Yeah, and then we went there was a Mussolini school there or something, and that's where we went. And I was a junior officer. I was the last one to arrive in the outfits. You know, I'd just been there just a week or so or two. So they made me motor officer of all things. Well, this I thought was terrible, but I didn't know anything about motor officer. But anyway, I didn't bother me any. But the best part was I had the vehicles.
Had a vehicle, and
yeah.
Find a good sergeant.
Yeah, we had a vehicle. We had about 6 ambulances. We had 2 for platoon. And we had some. So anyway, we parked and I was kind of leery of this school because I figured they'd mind it, and sure enough, they had. They took bundles of dynamite out of there the engineers did while we were there. So anyway, one day we needed gas, and gas was difficult, and so we drove into Naples and see if we could get some gas, and. I drove up the Via Roma in Naples, which is the main street of Naples. And if you know anything about Italian cities, they're crowded to the gills. I drove up the Via Roma, the whole distance of it, and never saw a soul. There wasn't a single person on the street. The shops were all closed, everything. And we got part way up there, and there was a British tank that was going along on the opposite street, and a guy with a turret turning around back and forth. Was an English guy. He sitting watching. Look, apparently there'd been some sniping. I don't know. But anyway, we found the gas dump, got our gas, and we started back over Bagnoli. And it was a beautiful place, there. The road along there around Naples is just gorgeous. And so we stopped just to look at it. And I turned around and I looked back toward Naples. And all of a sudden I saw this great geyser go up from Naples. I thought, and the Jeep driver was with me. And I said, "What in the world is that?" And we looked at it a minute, and all of a sudden the sound hit, boom, just like that. We both automatically dove under the Jeep. I mean, it was coming, but we didn't realize. That was the post office that blew up, and there was some 300 paratroopers were killed in it.
I've read about that. I've seen photos of
it was. Well, that, again, unnerved us anyway. Well, we finally got our equipment, and we moved up to...
So you weren't in operation?
No, we were just living there. We just got off the ship, and then we had to go down to the harbor, and some of our equipment came in, and we drew the stoves and the cots and all the medical stuff and everything else. And we didn't have anything for equipment. We had never had any equipment. They just furnished it all when we got over there. And we went to Caserta, and Caserta is where the palace is. It was a gorgeous place up there. And at that time, the 36th Division was making their first try across the Rapido, and they wanted us in a hurry. So we stacked up there and took off in a big rush. and then we moved up across the. We crossed the river, but I don't remember. It was not the Rapido. It was up further in the mountains, more or less. And set up the hospital. And
Did you have problems with German aircraft?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, this is the part. Of course, we were green as grass. We were riding. It was beautiful. This was September, and September in Italy is gorgeous. The sun is out and everything. So we drove up this road in a convoy, and then they had selected a site for us, and so they started putting the tents up and everything. And so again, the motor officer was sent out to see if we could find some water because we needed to fill our water tank. So I had seen this tanker go by, and I figured it was water. So I went out and cornered him, and oh yeah, he said he could fill the tank for us. So he brought his tanker in. We were all standing there getting this water into the tank. You know, they put it up on a elevated thing so you could draw the water out. All of a sudden, I heard this plane just coming down. So, geez, I went diving under the damn water tanker, and the 36th Division Clearing Company was there. And of course, they'd been to Salerno, they'd been North Africa, and everything else. So they all looked up and they said, "Oh, that's a Spitfire." And they said, "Look at these dumb guys all diving in the underneath the trucks and everything." That's a Spitfire. Well, it went over our truck about probably 200 feet. I mean, it was I could see the lines of the tires on it, you know, when it went by, and all of a sudden the whole front end of that thing opened up with gunfire. And I mean, the whole front wing just started, and with that, they went under the trucks. Well, we had come overseas with the 100th Infantry Battalion, which was the Japanese, the Japanese battalion.
Oh, uh-huh.
Came from Hawaii and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were moving up that day, and within, I'd say 5 minutes, here they come with bodies hanging off of jeeps and everybody. Of course, we really weren't set up, but we had enough set up so we could at least administer some care. And of course, again, it was a terrible blow. I mean, we thought this was a big lark up at this point. We just had a big time getting out. And here was all this blood and guts all over the place. I mean, I couldn't believe they were bringing them down. Of course, they were green too. They had just gotten there too. And they had been up at they had a bypass thing up there where the bridge was out. This guy had caught them at the bypass with the thing. Come to find out, it was a German, of course, flying a Spitfire that they had captured.
Ruse de guerre.
Oh, what a terrible beginning that was. Well, anyway,
you're suddenly in it, weren't you?
Suddenly in it, and we really weren't too well set up. We did get some emergency work done, and then we evacuated them to an evac hospital. Then the next...
You're just trying to stabilize them?
Yeah, we had the tents up and stuff, and we had some medical equipment to stop bleeding. It was really first aid almost.
Do you remember the first one you worked with?
Oh gosh, I don't remember that. In fact, again, I was out there running around trying to get some ambulances up there to help them and that sort of thing. I didn't really get into the medical thing that first day. Well, then our assignment became to they split our hospital up into 3 units, as platoons they called it, and we went with the 36th Division Clearing Company, and then they sent us the 2nd Auxiliary Surgical Teams, and they were the ones that did the surgery. We did just pre-op and post-op and housekeeping. And the 2nd Auxiliary Surgery Group was Colonel Churchill was the head of it. He was the chief of surgery at Harvard. And they were, the surgical team was a surgeon, assistant, and an anesthesiologist, and 2 nurses, and I think 2 technicians. That was a team. And they would come up, and they would send us usually 3 teams or 4 teams. And we were stationed with the clearing company, and what we did is what they call the bellies and the chests. Those are the ones that could not be evacuated, and the major amputations. So we did the major surgery, and of course it was a lot of them our mortality was about 25%, terrible. But it was really the start of the MASH hospital. But we were usually within 2 or 3 miles of the front line. I mean, they just a lot of times the clearing company, the ambulances would bring them in. They just send them across. We set up right in the same field with a clearing company. And we worked slowly up the valley there toward Casino. We were up in the mountains more or less, and then the 5th Army was made up of quite a group of people. We had the Americans, we had the English, we had the Australians, we had the we had the French North Africans, we had the Goons and the Singalese, and God knows what else.
Yeah, it was a real
conglomeration.
Diverse army.
Yeah. And up on the right flank, where we went way up in the mountains, we had the French, the Goons came. It was rather exciting because they carried all of their meat on the flesh. They kept the cows in the back of the trucks and stuff. They didn't have anything else. They also kept the whores there too, and so they'd go by with a whole GMC full of these women. All. So it was kind of exciting. It was kind of interesting. Let's see what happened along there in that line. One day, I went down to headquarters. I like to get a shower. It was hard to get a shower, and we had some showers in our unit, but they never worked very well. And so the engineers, I'd been down to headquarters, let's say the day before or something, and I had seen this nice shower set up, beautiful. The engineers had set up where you could go take a shower and put clean clothes on. So I thought I wanted to go down and get a shower. So we got a shower, and the Jeep and I were coming along this road north of Van Afro, and it was right out in the open, and I'm sitting there. Of course, we had the windshield all down because we covered up because of reflections and everything. And I looked up and I saw an airplane squadron. It was probably 15, and I looked like they were B-26s or something. I couldn't tell, but there was some clouds there, and they were above the clouds, and I could see them once in a while. Every once in a while they'd go out. You could hear them up there, and it was our Air Force, So I'm sitting there looking at them, and all of a sudden I see something fall out of one of them, and I looked at it. God, what is that anyway? And I looked at it some more, and it was a string of bombs. I said, where in the hell is that going? Of course, he's up there quite a while. I figured maybe it's going. So I said to the Jeep driver, I said, I don't like what I see up there. And he said, what'd you see? And I said, I think I saw some bombs come out of one of those airplanes. And he looked at me kind of quizzical, and the cars are going by, and so he stopped, and we were right on a culvert, and water underneath. And I said, God damn, I don't know what this is. I'm going to. So I went over one side in the culvert, he went over the other side, and we could see each other, head to head as we got in there. All of a sudden, I tell you, the concussion, and you wouldn't believe what happened. I mean, the dirt and all the dust and everything. We came pulled out of there, and I'm telling you, see, that road had been full of traffic, and they were going over us as we were underneath there. Just bodies everywhere. I mean, it was our bombers that bombed us, and we were within a mile of Fifth Army headquarters forward position. They were way. I think of this when I hear the poor guy talking about the friendly fire thing,
Yeah, as though somehow it just developed in Vietnam.
Yeah, I think, geez, they must have killed 100 in that road, because those bombs walked right down the road. And we picked up 2 of them and took them on up to hospital, and both of them survived. Both of them were double amputees. It's a difficult survival because they usually bleed to death before they get to the thing. Well, that was one experience. Let me think of what else happened to me.
Just a kind of technical question. Did you have any problems over time getting things that you needed in terms of supplies?
No, we did pretty well. The supplies were very good. And that's one thing somebody asked me one time ago, and that is, I never went without a meal. Of course, I know the infantry did, but we were, of course, we always had food. I never went without a meal.
And you got the other stuff you needed, like
yes.
medical supplies?
Yeah, and we got a lot of blood. We got a lot of, they bled the Italians down in Naples, and they used to pay them for it, but we had a lot of, and we had good equipment. And as I say, the surgical teams brought their own, their instruments and all that stuff. And see, they would come and stay with us and do surgery and then look after them for a few days, and then we'd evacuate them. And then if they pulled us back or did something, they would go back to their unit. See, they didn't stay with us. They would rotate around wherever they were. The surgical teams would. I was trying to think. Oh, I guess the next thing that happened to me was I got the diarrhea. I got it real bad.
It happens to everybody sooner or later.
Oh, geez, and I couldn't. And my commanding officer was Bob Newman, and I don't know whether you ever knew Bob Newman, but he was a chest surgeon in Knoxville.
I don't think so.
Well, anyway, that's after the war, and Bob Newman was my CO, and we stayed in the same tent together, and he said my name was Bud B. He said, "Bud, I'm sick of you waking me up at night going out to that damn latrine." He said, "I think you ought to do something about that." He'd been in North Africa and so on. He thought maybe I had amoebic dysentery. So they sent me back. This was in December. Things were slowing down then, and the mud and everything else was going on. We had mules carrying supplies right up behind our tent, on up through the valley, and they were bringing the casualties back on mule trains. They had big, long mule trains. I mean, like 15 or 20 mules in a row. And so I went back to the hospital, and I always have a good story on that one. They sent me down for a barium enema. This is in a field hospital in a tent. And, of course, if you've ever had that experience, that's the one thing. They filled me all up with barium, and the guy punched all around and said, "Gee, I think everything's all right." So he left. This is the doctor. So I got up off the table, and the technician said the latrine is down the street. So I went tearing down the damn street, and I got in there. There was about 6 or 8 guys on one of these big latrines, sitting around, all reading papers and everything else. And I sat down, and this explosion went off, and everybody looked up. What the hell's wrong with this guy? Well, anyway, they decided that I had an ulceration or something in my colon, so they sent me back to Naples. And so I spent Christmas on 1943 at the 300th General in Naples, a beautiful hospital up on the hill, with all the USO coming there, and then all the programs and everything else.
Do a lot worse.
Oh yeah, just beautiful food and everything else. Like a luxury hotel almost. And I was on the officers' ward, and of course, the minute I got there, all these other guys were there, and they said, "You're a MD?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, what are the symptoms of an ulcer?" So I told him a few things, and then I'd sit there, and the major would come around on his rounds, and he'd talk to me, and then he'd go to the next bed, and here would come this total recitation of just what I told him the day before. And I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do, whether to not tell these guys or to tell them or what the hell, because it meant life or death to them.
Right.
So anyway, well, to make a long story short, this guy went down and they X-rayed him, and by God, he had an ulcer. He came back up and just shouting, "I've got an ulcer!" Can you imagine? I mean, if anybody else would think, "Oh, what a terrible thing it was." I'm going back to the States. Well,
you couldn't get $1 million wound, but an ulcer would
just as good.
Do it.
Well, to continue that into just the thing, later on we got to Anzio, 36th Division was there, and I knew what company this guy was in. So I had a patient from there, and I said, "You remember Lieutenant so-and-so?" He said, "Yeah." I said, I met him down to 300 General, and I said, "He went back to the States." He said, "No, he didn't." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He went to North Africa, and they healed his ulcer. They sent him back to duty, and he was killed about a week or 10 days ago at Anzio." So, well, anyway, the next step was the Anzio invasion, and we staged down up just north of Naples again on the beach up there.
So they pulled you back.
Yeah. Our unit came back while I was in the hospital, and refitted again, got some new equipment, some new tents, and some other things, and we went out on the beach there, and we loaded our stuff on LSTs, and in the harbor there. I wasn't involved in that because I didn't get there until everything was loaded.
That's nice. That's fair.
Oh yeah, that was good. And I went out to the beach, and we stayed there, and I think about a week, and we had another interesting thing. Joey Brown, you remember Joey Brown?
Oh, yes.
Joey Brown came and had a stage in the middle, and it was probably, I'd say maybe 100,000, maybe 75,000. It wasn't just loaded with GIs, on that beach around that stage. And he won through his act and everything else. Well, what he didn't know is up on the bank, up on the hill behind it, there was a whore up there, and there was a line of GIs to it. See, and of course everybody's sitting there with not too much to do. They were all. Pretty soon they'd say, "Watch, watch." See, the word was going through all the 70,000. See, and so pretty soon they'd start to yell, "Next!" One would come out, and the next thing, the whole crowd would yell, "Next!" And of course, Joey Brown didn't know what the hell was going on. Of course, it was inappropriate for what he was saying, and he couldn't figure out what the hell was going on in this outfit. And finally, somebody ran up on the stage and drew him down and whispered, and he turned around and he looked up there.
Lots of sides to war.
Lots of sides to war. Okay, the next thing we went to Anzio, and we got on an LST and at night, and all rode up there. I was with an English LST. You know, the crew was all English, and we had ammunition trucks and things else much later, and some of our trucks is what I went with, and so we pulled into the harbor in the morning, and God, it was a beautiful day. It was in January, but it was warm and the sun was out. Everything looked good. We had all these anti-aircraft. You know, they tie a balloon to
Barrage balloons.
Barrage balloon,
balloon.
yeah, and everything up. And so, and they started unloading, and you could see the beach. We're about 100, I'd say 100 yards off the beach, not more than that. And so everybody started unloading and everything, and then here come this air raid. And so, geez, you could hear them coming. They were dive bombers. I could hear them coming a mile. I don't know if they were Stukas or what they were, but anyway, I dove in behind one of these gunners he had a kind of a compartment there, and I dove in there, and he fired all the way. Boy, he didn't give up on that thing at all. And that guy let a bomb go, and it went right underneath the bottom of this LST. And I didn't, of course, know anything I was on it, but they told me on shore that it blew it out of water. The propeller everything came out of water. Well, I've never experienced. It was funny because it was it wasn't a rust bucket, but the only thing that impressed me was there was a rust in the air. It just shook everything loose in the rust, and the air was filled with rust. And of course, the thing went skipping off. I saw him going, and this guy falling with a damn machine gun. Well, we kind of everybody sort of recovered and come back from on various holes and places, and I had a couple of people that got some shrapnel in them that were on the aft end of the thing. So I put some bandages on that. They were all minor wounds. These were sailors, English sailors. And all of a sudden, we got a call, and the smoke came up. And so they all went rushing down there with the things, and they found out that it was in the where they had the clothes. You know, they sold to the people that had some extra uniforms in there, and they caught on fire. So they tried to put it out, but it was smoking all the time. Well, this is the reason I go into this story is we sat there all day, and these jeep lighters would come out and go right by us and unload a ship next door. So they kept going. And finally, I said to the guy, I said, "What the hell?" I could see my hospital going up on shore. You know, the tents were all going up. And of course, we had about 2 or 3 more air raids. We weren't fortunately involved in any of them, but they did hit a ship on shore and set it on fire and all this stuff. God, I wanted to get off of that thing so bad. I could really consider swimming ashore. And finally, they flashed them signals, you know, on the shore. And they said that they looked at our cargo manifest, and we had all this ammunition on it, and they figured they'd just let us blow up. I said, "The hell with that noise! I want to get off of here." So they finally got the message ashore that we didn't have any serious fire, that the smoke coming up was from some uniforms that were burning. So they began to unload us. But this time it's dark. I mean, you know, the gun gone. So I get on this thing along with a tank or something else, and I go ashore with it. And it's funny, the things that you remember, because I got on shore, had my big pack on, you know, a lot more stuff that I should have had. And I started up the beach, and of course it's the beach is the sand is, you know, a foot thick and everything else. And I'm staggering along, and of course a complete blackout, not a light anywhere, you know. That's all. And then you can hear the vehicles coming. So I'm trudging along in this path, and all of a sudden I hear this clank, 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 clank coming along behind me. And I didn't know where the hell he was. See, he kept getting closer, 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 clank, 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 clank. And I would move to the side, and it seemed like he was following me. I thought that damn tank was going to run over me before I could. And you know, I'm staggering in the damn sand. I'll tell you, it was the most frightful thing I can imagine. Finally got on shore, and
Tanks are scary.
oh, in the dark you couldn't see a thing. It was absolute blackout.
I was down one time and had one. I was in the National Guard, and we were summer camp, and there was a tank that was passing below us on a road, and there were 3 of us on a hillside, and one came up behind us, and of course he couldn't see when he was coming over the hill, and we rolled both ways, and he came down right where we were. And tanks are real scary.
Oh, that's scary, I tell you.
Oh,
Well, anyway, well, we set up our hospital there on the beach, and we really didn't have very much to do. You know, there was very few casualties in the first few days. And we had a lot of air raids. And I always remember, see, we used to get the BBC, you know, and I'd sit there, and this was Edward R. Murrow. This is Edward R. Murrow in London. No planes appeared over the beachhead today. Christ, we'd been in our hole all day long. I said, Ed, you don't
Get it straight.
You got to get it straight. No planes appeared over the beachhead today. Well, let's see. We stayed there about a week or 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, and I guess the most exciting thing was General Lucas, who was the commanding general. He got wounded with a shrapnel somewhere. I don't remember exactly where it was. It was a minor wound, but relatively minor. But anyway, here come the whole damn staff in the hospital, you know, just everybody crowding around the bed. Well, of course, my job was to strip these people right off, because get the clothes off them so we could find out what was wrong with them. So we got his clothes on, and the way to get the clothes off was to cut them. Zip, zip. So I got out my scissors, and he had these beautiful cavalry boots on, you know, like you would know a general. I was just going to cut the strings down through that. God, he rose up on that cot. He said, "God damn you, don't you cut them boots." I thought, oh, hell.
Okay, General.
I'm just going to cut the strings. Oh, well, that's all right. So that was my experience with General Lucas. Well, anyway, well, let's see what else happened.
Anzio was, you were wherever you were on Anzio, you were close to the front.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was just looking at some pictures here. We were about 3 miles, anywhere around. It was a 3-mile radius is what it was. And, of course, we were away from the Anzio and the Tuna. We were out there on the beach a while, and then finally I guess the surgeon, somebody made the thing that we should all move together, the hospitals. And we'd put out a lot of Red Cross, and we hoped that they'd stay away from us. So we had to move over to where the major hospital units were. And it was about 3 evacs and another field hospital. I think there were about 6 hospitals, maybe 4 or 5, all in one compound. And I guess the next thing happened on that was it was relatively, we had pretty steady casualties thing along. It wasn't too lot of work, but at times we got where we had to go on. The one I hated the worst was 8 on and 8 off. If you've ever done that, it is really terrible. Yeah. But anyway, one night we were all sitting in there, and the shells would come periodically, but most of the time they were going down over. We had what we call Anzio Annie. You've heard of that? That railroad gun was something. Oh, it was tremendous. And I got tuned to that thing, so I could hear. I'm convinced that I could hear the muzzle blast of that thing. So I knew it was on the way, and I could tell by the sound of that muzzle blast if it was coming anywhere near me. Now I may be crazy, but I just heard it just so, and I said that son of a gun's coming pretty close. Well, anyway, this night, we were early there, and I don't think it was it wasn't a big shell. It was probably an 88 anyway, but a couple of rounds came in right in the hospital area. So we had a nice big hole dug, and then the MACI and we got in it, and then 2 or 3 more rounds came in, and then I heard a lot of to-do outside, so I went out, and our chief nurse had a steak on the fire, cooking at night, and she went out to turn the steak, and that shell come in and it hit they had a big dental table there where they did their work, you know, for making prosthesis and stuff, and that shell hit on that thing and just decapitated her. I never seen like it. This was our chief nurse, and I was trying to think, there was another casualty on that thing too. I guess it was one of the enlisted men got hurt but not killed. But it was quite a blow to us. Let's put it that way. I think this was the first nurse, except for maybe, I don't know, in the Philippines that was killed.
Yeah, they took casualties.
Yeah. Well, the other thing we got the daily air raids, and at night, and they used to barrage. They had all these guns, you know, all around, so they could the aircraft guns, and so it was like a 4th of July demonstration every night. The only problem was that some of that stuff came down after they fired up. It would come back down again. So Rookie and I, that was the MAC officer, we got tired of being in our hole. We couldn't see anything. So we dug a very elaborate hole out there, and we put some things on it, and we put some boards over, and then we covered it with some sandbags and everything. So we had an observation. So we could sit in that thing and watch the going on. Well, the story I will tell you was we had MAC officer, an MD that was named Max Benjamin. And Max Benjamin was a German Jew who had come over from Germany just before the war to escape Hitler. And then I guess he got picked up and he was sent in the army. Well, Max Benjamin was absolutely terrified. I mean, he knew what would happen to him if we were, and of course we thought for a while that we were going to be all prisoners. And Max was just absolutely terrified. I've never seen anybody so chronically terrified as that guy. Well, we had an air raid one night, and Max was in our tent, and he used to lay there like this and just shake, in the cot. And so I came around. I said, let's go to our plane. And Max, he just lay there and shake. So I said, well, come on, Max, let's go. No, he wasn't going to go. Well, anyway, the other guy and I got him out of the cot, brought him over, and we put him in the hole. Well, when we went back, after the air raid was over, a great big shell cone had come through the tent right where his head was. And it was with such force it had gone right through the cot and all the blankets to the ground. Right where his head was laying. So but anyway, I think Max made it out of there all right. I think they gave him a psychiatric discharge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see, Anzio.
Do you remember reading Bill Mauldin's cartoons?
Oh yes, I have a whole book full of Bill Mauldin's, yeah. And
because he was there too.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was in the 45th Division. He used to come on. All those people, Ernie Pyle came by. They especially when we got up further on, they always would come by and stop at a hospital unit because they could get a good meal on the road, on the way up. So Ernie Pyle came a lot. We saw him a lot, and so did Bill Mauldin, Stars and Stripes, and we were very familiar with all of them.
But you were there at Anzio until April.
Yeah,
May.
well, and then came and it got along toward the spring and beautiful weather again. And we were playing softball, and this is another story. So we played softball every night. And the officers against enlisted men and somebody else, I don't know, we had teams. My place was first base. And so we played every night. We played right after we eat and go out and play softball until it got dark. And so then we got the casualties, so that stopped all the softball games. So I went out there one night, and right on first base was a big shell hole. I mean, it was an 88. It hit right on first base, and I don't know what it was, but it was. Well, another thing that told us to the thing was Dahl was a dentist, and we went down to Salerno on rest leave. Not Salerno, but what is the Isle of Capri and the. What is the peninsula there? I forget the name of it now. It slips me. But we went on rest leave, and we had a wonderful time there.
Take you out by boat?
No, we went by car. We went by jeep around through Pompeii, by that, and out onto the peninsula. I'll think of the name of it. It was a nice luxury hotel, and we stayed there about a week and enjoyed it, and came back. And then after we came back, they started really with the big guns firing into the harbor, and we could hear all this stuff going over. It was kind of fun. It was going both ways. We had the battleship Texas out there, and we had something else. And that's another interesting thing. We'd stand out there and watch, and you could hear them firing, out at sea. And as the shell gets closer to the ground, it slows up. And you could see these things coming through the air, ball of fire going through. I mean, these great big 16 and 18-inch shells. They were going on over toward the Germans. And the same way we were getting them back this way. But they were crossing in the air, and we were here, and we didn't see by. So anyway, the shelling went on pretty severely there, and it got to where nobody wanted to go down to Anzio at all. In fact, we had a master sergeant who had lost all his stripes because he wouldn't go down to Anzio to get the mail. He just refused. And if he refused, the CO said, if you're not going to do it, you lose your stripes. He said, I don't care. I don't want to go. So anyway, I went back up to the bulletin board the next thing, and here was this, anybody wants to go to, not Salerno, but something like that. But anyway, the Isle of Capri, sign up. So Dahl was there with him, and I said, well, let's sign up again. I said, I don't care about the shelling. I said, we'll be all right. He said, okay, I'll go. So we signed up. And it was about 4 or 5 days went by, and there was no more signatures. The colonel called us up, and he said, listen, you bastard just got back from rest leave. He said, are you going to go again? And I said, sure, we just go again. And he said, well, nobody else will sign up. He said, well, we got a quota of 2 to go, so I'm going to let you go. Well, you know, you get very superstitious about something, and you think, well, no, that's something I shouldn't have done. You know, I'm pushing the curve here. Well, it's very interesting. We went down and we loaded in trucks in a railroad cut down at Anzio. It was a big, deep cut there, you know, where it was protected on both sides. And the LSTs came in, and when they came in, they were all backed on, so they could drive right off. And when they came back on again, they drove right on. See? So there was a minimum of time at the thing. So all of a sudden, the truck starts up, and I mean, he was going 65 and 70 miles an hour through the city of Anzio, and down to the docks and onto the ship. And then out we went in the harbor. Never heard a shell, never heard anything. Same way, coming back. Came back in, never heard a shell. We were down there on 10 days or 2 weeks again.
Sometimes you get lucky.
I guess that was it. I was worried, though. I thought I was really, that I was really pushing. Well, we broke into Rome. That was a great experience, riding down there with thousands of people lining the road, throwing flowers at us, you know, God, we were conquering heroes, you know.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be a conquering hero.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, and we went down into Rome, and as I say, of course, Rome is a beautiful city, but the streets were, I'd say they were 10 or 15 deep all the way, and they just lined right up on each side. And we drove through that thing down through there. It was a real experience.
Did you have time to stay in Rome at all?
Oh, we stayed there about 4 or 5 days is all. And then, of course, they were moving fast up ahead, and they wanted our field hospital because it was much easier to move, and there were no casualties. So we went up to Piombino and a couple other places. We'd set up and stay overnight almost, and then the next day move on another 30 or 40 miles. So we went right up the Italian coast in a hurry. And all the way really to Florence. We didn't, they would be occasionally, we'd get a few casualties, but not very much. And then we, of course, went into Florence, and that's, all the bridges were down there, but they had Bailey bridges up, and they didn't do much damage to Florence. You know, Florence was saved because of the Ponte Vecchio and all that. They blew the houses on each side of it, so it was completely, you couldn't use it, but they didn't blow the bridge. And then not much happened until we got up to, they started the winter line up there.
Yeah.
And we took a lot of casualties there, a lot of them. Oh, one more thing I should tell you, maybe about casualties, and I forgot to tell you. When we broke out of the beachhead, it was Memorial Day. You know, it was right at the end of May and June.
Right.
June 5th we went into Rome. Well, we were at the peak of the casualties. And of course, this was this 8 on and 8 off stuff. And all right, I've been doing it a week or 10 days, and we were just, they were loaded with casualties. We were getting behind where we were operating on them maybe 12, sometimes 18 hours. We had a backlog. You had to make a decision which one to work on. It was that bad. So I just got to bed, and this enlisted man came in and shook me, and he said, Colonel wants you to go to get up and put on a first-class uniform. Mark Clark is going to give a Memorial Day speech at the graveyard, and they want everybody who has every unit who has a casualty there, it has to have somebody there to represent them. Of course, we had a couple of nurses, and yeah. I got out of the bed. I'm telling you, I didn't know what I was going to come, and I put on a first-class uniform, and I went down to the damn graveyard. The thing I want to tell you was they had a screen up there, and there were 800 unburied bodies stacked like cordwood behind that screen. And, I mean, you have to think of 800. That is a hell of a lot of people. And every once in a while the wind would shift, and it would be just, awful. So Mark gave his speech. And then, of course, this Graves registration unit had been on the beach with me down at the thing, and they did not have an officer. So if you don't have an officer, you can't get paid. So this sergeant had come over to me, and I was an adjutant of the hospital, and he said, can I attach you onto you so we can get some money? He said, I'll bring the morning report and all that. And I said, sure, I'd be glad to do that. So for the week or 10 days or 2 weeks we were there, he came every morning with this morning report, and I signed it and all that so they could get paid. But I got to know him pretty well. So anyway, after this speech was over with, I saw one of the guys there, and I went down. I said, gee, we talked about this graveyard, and we talked a minute. And I said, well, where's Sergeant so-and-so? He said, don't you know about him? I said, no. He said, he was killed right over there. The shell came in and killed him. He's buried right over there. Well, okay, we got north of Rome to Florence, and then we did a lot of work up north of Florence. And then we...
Casualties caused mostly by shrapnel?
Artillery fire, yeah.
Artillery fire.
Yeah. And mines, too. We had a lot of mine problems. We didn't have so many there as later on, I'll tell you. Well, we went up in the mountains,
Apennines?
Apennines, yeah, up in the mountains. And set up over in there, and a couple of episodes there. We set up in this hospital, a nice little field, and were there for about a week or 10 days. Right out in the middle of this field lay this big bomb, just laying there. There wasn't any thing, just laying there. And so everybody kind of walked around it and looked at it.
off, and I'm telling you, again, the concussion, you couldn't believe it. It was a 500-pounder. Imagine they'd been sitting on it, getting the pictures taken. Well, that's just something else. Then, of course, winter came, and we were up there and way up there in the mountains. And the Germans are all down in the valley where it's nice and warm, so they really screwed us on this thing good. And they stopped us within probably 4 or 5 miles of the valley, you know. So here we were, everything was up in the mountains and the snow and mud. And that's when I went with the 248 Field Artillery. Their medical officer had, his time was in or something anyway, and he left, and so they put me on temporary duty with this 248 Field Artillery. And that was quite an experience for me because I hadn't ever been with a line outfit, and Colonel McBride was there, and he was a West Pointer. He was a commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel, and he was a West Pointer, and boy, he knew his stuff. And it was great because he knew what I was supposed to do, and I damn well better find out what I think. So I had to check the kitchens and all this stuff, you know. We were 155 howitzers, yeah, and it was kind of interesting because I say it was well, we had one bad day. We used to get shelled, you know, and had a lot of incoming rounds, and we used to always, it was a tradition that the medical, we'd see in the artillery, in the infantry, evacuate your casualty to the first aid station. In the artillery, the first aid station goes out and picks you up. That's different, see. That means at the height of the shelling, guess who's out there in the damn ambulance going to the gun pit? Me. Well, I still think of this because the shells would start coming in. You know, we had a nice big house with a big wall on it, so we were pretty safe. We were all sitting around on the floor. This was the unit, you know, the medical unit, and we all sitting there watching that damn field form, because if that son bitch roamed, we knew we had to drag our ass out and go. Well, and then one day it roamed, and I had we tore up through there. Fortunately, there wasn't anything coming in, man, but they had made a direct hit on the gun pit. And I had never had the experience of arriving on a situation just as it happened. I mean, within seconds of how it happened. And I had a hard time with my enlisted men because there were some people who were besides their chest torn out, but they were wide awake, you know. So, and they'd want to be start to do work on us. So there's no point working on him. Just give him a big shot of morphine. Let's go on to somebody else. I had the triage thing was the important thing. And these are guys they knew. See, I mean, that's Jerry. I mean, you know, can't I go do something for him? I said, you can't do a damn thing for him. And he was wide awake, conscious. I could give him a big shot of morphine, and that's it. You know, we had those morphine syringes, you know, they just hit him and squeeze it, you know. And the triage was so, and then we have somebody with a leg or something where you put a tourniquet on and address it, stop the bleeding and that sort of thing. But the getting on that scene, I'll never forget that, and seeing the guys still wide awake and perfectly conscious and with major parts of their body torn off. It's unbelievable. It's horrible how you can survive that even for that long. Yeah. It's amazing, you know, they just, whole side of the chest gone, and here he was, talking to us, perfectly conscious. Well, anyway, that's some of those were real. Oh, that is hard. That was terrible for 50 years, yeah. Compared to anything in surgery or anything I've done since or anything else, there's nothing, this is just wild stuff. I had a little funny things that happened. Colonel McBride was a stickler for discipline, and you were supposed to do what you did. And of course, this 248th Field Artillery was the old former 13th Artillery Brigade. They were a Oklahoma National Guard outfit, and they'd been all the way from Salerno. So they had called out all of their neurotics and everything else. So I didn't have any of that stuff at all. I mean, they had all long gone, see. The stuff I had there were wonderful people, all of them. And after we'd been there a couple of weeks or so, they attached this battery of long toms to us. And they had some English long toms there or something. I don't know. They'd been back a mile or two, so I hadn't paid much attention to them. But they attached this battery of long toms to us. And those are 155 rifles, you know. That's the long one. They were firing into Bologna. So Colonel McBride and I used to go with him all the time. I'd get in the Jeep and we'd tore off down the road to this thing was coming in. And he looked over that thing and he says, oh boy, he says, you've got some work to do. And the command, they had been in the canal zone all the war up until then, and they had figured there was nothing to do from the canal zone, so they'd send them as a battery for a long time. So they hadn't any combat experience at all. Well, they had set one gun behind the other, and Colonel McBride said, you gotta move that thing right off. All the company command said, oh, that's a hell of this mud, and I don't care, he says, you're firing one over the other, you gotta get change that. Well, we'll do it tomorrow. Well, anyway, at the same time, I hadn't had any sick call at all, so-called sick call. There was somebody would come down with a cold or something else. That's what I meant. I didn't have any. All of a sudden, I got all these big long line out there, and it was a core order that you wore a helmet. Everybody had a headache from wearing the helmet. Now you laugh, but I mean, just 10 guys standing in a row, all got a headache. So I gave them a few aspirin. Well, can't we take it? I said, no, sir, you keep that helmet on. Well, that's needless to say, first thing they got was a muzzle blast off of this thing. And fortunately, it was far enough out so it didn't get anybody. But it blew up, right at the end of the barrel, right over the next gun pit. So all the shrapnel went, fortunately, off of them. That was the last call I ever had anybody who didn't want to wear the helmet. Everybody else had a helmet on after that. I told Curly Brian, he just laughed to kill himself. You cured all the headaches. The command. Well, anyway, let's see where it was. Then I went back to the hospital for the last push, and by the way, Bob Dole was in our hospital. He was badly hurt in that first push coming out of things. And then going out of there, we had the mines. And they had these mines that were about that square and about that deep. And they're all wood, except for the fuse. And they were very difficult to find with the thing. And these guys, when this infantry started out through there, it was the most horrible thing because they'd step on a mine and it would blow off their foot. It wasn't big enough to blow a leg off. Blow off the foot, and then it streaked up through and got both eyes. And I had a roll of them in that thing. I can remember at least 10 or 15, all with the same injury. Both eyes gone, and a foot off from these mines. You get the dirt would come up and just hit their eyes. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I had 10 or 15 in a row there in the thing, we cleaned them up, getting the face cleaned up and try to do something about their eyes. Maybe one eye would still be there, but most of the time both eyes were gone. Well, I guess that was about the end of of course the push went on and we had casualties and nothing new about that. And then we pushed into the Po Valley. And then a very interesting thing occurred. The last, as the war came to an end there in the spring, beautiful weather and everything, there were a lot of strange things happen. One of them was we had the so-called Red Brigade. I don't know whether you ever heard of that or not. Probably you never have. But the Red Brigade was a bunch of, I call them criminals, but anyway, they had a red handkerchief around, and they were so-called paisano, or they were supposedly helping the Allies win the victory. Well, they were out there to steal what they could steal, is really what they were doing. And we moved up to the river there, and we stopped, and so I went back with the trucks to get all the stuff we had left. We had some mess tables and some chairs and some other stuff that we figured we probably didn't need, but wound up with it. So I said, well, I'll take the truck and go back and we'll get them. And it was probably a 60-mile trip, so it's quite a ways back. We got back to the thing, loaded it all up, and then we come. And as we came back, it's getting dark. And they have autobahns there, in Italy, just like they do in Germany. Have a thing. And the day before, we had heard that they had killed a nurse and they'd killed 2 or 3 other people and taken their jeep. The East Red Brigade, somebody caught them, Of course, this is fresh in our minds, and so here it is just getting dark, and we're in this GMC, and we got about 10 more miles to get when we get to where the unit is. And we came over this hill, I'll never forget it. We looked down there, and then at the bottom of the hill was a car parked with about 6 of these guys with these red bandanas on. And as we started down the hill, they started waving their guns in the air, and sort of pointing at us, but just waving them more or less. And the driver looked at me and he said, what are we going to do? And I said, we sure ain't going to stop. So I said, you let this thing, shift this thing down to about the 4th gear, so it'll sound like it's winding down. You let it slow down, and just as we get within about 50 yards of the thing, I said, you shift it into high gear, and let's go. Well, that damn, if you've ever seen a GMC, there were, that thing, you could hear it miles, it would wind down, and of course they thought we were stopping. And just as we got there, we came off, and we took off, and sure enough, the bullets hit back on the damn picnic table and stuff. Well, we were out of there. But nobody knows much about that. Another thing, they came in our unit, came into our unit and they wanted gasoline. And they waved the machine gun around a little bit at our commanding officer, because we didn't have any guns on anything else. And so, I always remember Sergeant Soto, he went and he saw what was happening at a distance, and he got about 15 or 20 of our enlisted men, and they just closed right in on this guy. And he looked around and he saw all these guys, and Captain, I always remember, you get the hell out of here. In the Italian. He's pretty good in Italian. And he left. But, you know what was going to happen. And I always say the day in Europe was my worst night that I spent over there. We, had either the war is over. All night long I lay in that cot and you could hear the burp guns going everywhere. Bullets going everywhere. And I thought, God, wouldn't it be awful to get killed on the last day of the war by some sort of a big shooting in the air? So I guess that's about it. It came back, staged, and I was sent to it was very interesting because I got sent to the 13th, 141st Medical Battalion, and I was That's another interesting. You had to have 85 points to go home. And guess what I had? I had 84. And of course, I was regular Army. I'd been a regular Army intern, so they said, well, you're going to the Pacific. So I said, well, I guess I can't do anything else. I just have to. But anyway, they transferred me over to a collecting company. I had about 40 ambulances. And we went around through northern Italy there. And these Italians had taken in these wounded Germans and looked at them, fed them, dressed their wounds, and taken care of them. And I saw something in it, and it was just amazing because, you know, the Germans hadn't been too good to the Italians. And here, but this was a person who came to their door, he was wounded, and these, you know, Italians are Italians. And come in, we'll take care of you. We'll dress his wounds. They had fractured femurs that had been operated on, and they couldn't get back to the Brenner Pass because there's so much bombing going on. And so we had to collect all these guys, you know, from these Italian homes. And there was tears spread when they left, you know. Geez, we go in there and pick them up, and everybody was crying. The German was crying, and the Italians were crying. It was a strange thing, you know. Had you dealt with very many German wounded before that? Oh, we had some, yeah. They captured, yeah. But they weren't, you know, they were just, but this was quite a sensation for this. And that's when I appreciated the C-47, you know, the airplane. Because we would get a bunch together. We'd have probably maybe 100 to maybe 150, you know. I'd call this thing, and he'd say, coordinate so-and-so, so-and-so, you know, on our military map. He said, we'll be there. And this would be just a field, just an open field. And this C-47 would come down, land around this field, and we'd be our ambulances, we'd load them all on it, and off they'd go. Just amazing to me how they just, no airport, anything, really, just brought a field and landed it.
Gutsy pilots and good planes.
Gutsy pilots and good planes, yeah.
Did, in the hardest times, did you ever have the feeling that you couldn't keep on?
No, I never had that at all. I never bothered. I will say that one night, Anzio was very flat, and we had a GMC there that had a metal cat, not in contradistinction to the canvas things, yeah. And so our trick was to get up on top of the metal cabin. You could see pretty good. And I stood on top of that metal cabin, and I could see them firing tanks and stuff between me and India. That was when that push got to the worst there. They drove a wedge way down in there, you know. And I was pretty convinced that we were going to be captured. I just thought there was not much hope. And then the 45th Division, we were getting captured out. And I said they were at this overpass, you know, where this thing was. A lot of them were coming in from that area. There's pictures of it here. Where this overpass, they called it. And they said, we're not going to be able to hold out. And if we can't hold out, they'll drive the tanks right down into Enzo. And so for, I think, 2 or 3 days there, we thought we might not make it. And of course, at the same time, we had a radio on, and Hitler was saying, we're going to drive them into the sea. We're going to drive them into the sea. And Hitler has commanded it. Well, you know, that makes me think another thing happened one day. Got me down the truck. This is just before the push to take off. And it was in late May, and of course we never knew these things were going to happen. And all of a sudden, one morning, beautiful clear day, here started formation of planes coming over, and they were coming from Corsica. You know, they were twin-engine E-29s or something, and they were going over and they were bombing over there. They run through, and then the few fighters would come through and go over. So they always take only about 10 miles away to see one going. And then they had gotten through that, and you could hear the bombs going and all that. But then all of a sudden, here come the flying fortresses, and I mean just thousands of them. I have never seen anything like it. Just a stream of them coming. And I stood on top of that truck, and actually we were 10 miles away. The ground shook where we were from those bombs.
It must have been like, oh, it must have been like where those Germans were. It must have been awful. And of course, Victoria and some of these towns up there were just, there wasn't buildings then left over. But they just kept coming and coming and coming along the stream of formation. I used to rather German, I probably looked over and think we lost the war. I tell you, it was really, well, I had a couple of dogfights for them today there. Over us, you know, you can, going to hell. And then all of a sudden, when we catch fire and start down, and they'd say, we got it. And it was all in American. And the parachute would open up. That's another bit. It was funny because we were all standing there watching this thing going on, and we saw this plane catch on fire and start to come down, and it kind of, the pilot bailed out. You could see his parachute and started to turn, and by God, it turned and started right at us. Now, looking up, this thing's coming right at us. And I went, what? And everybody started scurrying for a hole. And that thing finally turned and hit about, I guess 100, 200 yards away. But it was screaming, and it went into a side of a hill, like a P-47, I think. The big one was a Thunderbolt. It had the big engine for it. And it went into the hill. And of course, all relieved. And again, the same thing that sound took a minute to get here. We saw it go into the hill, and all of a sudden you heard the sound, and it just all the booty off the ground, and it was just a noise. Did you, at your hospital, have any dealings with psychiatric patients? People? Well, we had a few, but not really. We did not have a psychiatrist. We were strictly a surgical hospital, so we didn't. No, when they were up there in the hospital thing, I did a lot of medical work that took care of a lot of malaria. We had a lot of malaria there. And I had a medical board, and we had a few. But, by then, at the end of the angio thing, most of those people were good soldiers. But that's not often we do that. Before. And George Patton had waited a few of them out in Sicily. One of the things they called it Normandy, that I remember reading about was even good soldiers, if they're in the line long enough. Oh, yeah. Now, you see Morgan's cartoon. Those guys used to come back with a circle around it. They looked haggard. They hadn't shaved, and they had nothing to eat. And they had been chronically scared for probably 48, 72 hours or so. They looked bad. They did. And that's a good food, and shower and shave and everything. Just 2 or 3 days are fine, they're all right. But you've seen William Bill with it. That's the way they looked.